Hi, I'm David Allen Lambert. Welcome to Virtual Historians. I'm here with my colleague Terry O'Connell, bring you another exciting episode of how virtual reality and history are blended together to bring you something to go backwards in time, but to bring it forward, maybe into your Oculus or on your computer screen. We are really honored today to have a guest who I'm sure is going to become a real good friend and someone I hope that we have back again is our professor from England, Professor Bob Stone. He is someone that you may have heard of before because he's been very much involved in virtual reality, and his work in the history field is just amazing. So without further ado, Bob, if you could give our listeners who don't really know a little bit about your career, sort of a little bit of your background and how VR and history came about into your world.
Sure. It's lovely to speak to you, Terry and David. Great to be here on this interesting English nearly summer evening. I've got a very strange background. I will try and make this as painlessly short as possible. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a software guy. I'm actually a psychologist by training, which is a little bit weird, but it kind of explains why I got into virtual reality back in 1987, because I was doing some human factors work for the European Space Agency. And whilst I was at a conference in Maryland, I came across this wonderful guy called Dr. Steve Ellis, who literally took me over to NASA Ames, just south of San Francisco, snuck me in without any clearance at all, took me into his lab, put this strange scuba mask with a couple of pocket TVs from Radio Shack on my head. Wow, I mean, that's where my career changed. He put me in front of this ascending escalator. I think you guys in the States call it an escalator, don't you?
Absolutely.
And my vision was telling me I was going up. My inner ear was telling me, no, you're not. You're on solid ground. And it was just that experience that really got me going. It was absolutely incredible. And over the years, I've been working very much in areas such as healthcare and defense and a little bit of education. But my number one passion has always been history and heritage, virtual heritage. We had some of the first ever virtual heritage conferences in Bath in the UK, obviously a fantastically popular Roman city. And since then, every opportunity I've had in taking some of this technology out with students and colleagues and doing crazy things underwater or crazy things at archaeological sites on Dartmoor, just north of Plymouth in the UK, I've done it. It's an area I'm passionate about. And it wasn't until the early 90s, really, that I managed to get involved in this. And we were, amongst other claims, we were the first people to bring virtual Stonehenge to the marketplace, if you want to call it a marketplace. I mean, it was done free of charge, which was presented with the late, great astronomer, Sir Patrick Moore, at the planetarium in London. And then a year later, we were sucking people virtually into one of the paintings in the north, which you may actually know of, David, L.S. Lowry, who was a fantastic artist in Salford, painting the downtrodden people in the industrial areas of Manchester and Cheshire and Salford. I just knew then that this was going to be the one area that was going to give me pleasure and joy for the rest of my career.
Well, it definitely sounds like you've had a little bit of history investigating history. And obviously, I mean, I think that your explanation, and I think Terry will probably agree with me, of that 1987 scuba mask with the Radio Shack televisions. I mean, that sounds like a neck breaker. But I understand that VR feeling because I think this is the first time I've ever actually mentioned this. So my daughter has an Oculus as well, and we used Richie's plank walk. And I tried it out and didn't have shoes on and fell and broke 2 toes. So as I fell off the building, I fell onto my couch, but broke 2 toes. So virtual reality became my reality. And so that whole feeling I was falling, and then I think VR is amazing. But for me, the VR with history, to feel that you're there. And I know beforehand we talked a little bit about Titanic, and I would love to talk a little bit more about that with you and your personal love for it as well. But one vessel that has a multinational interest is, of course, Mayflower. I'd love to have you tell us about your involvement. And of course, it was just the 400th anniversary of the arrival of the Mayflower here, not very far from where I live in Massachusetts. I live about 20 miles northwest of Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it's been obviously something that last year was supposed to be the great big commemoration with the Wampanoag people, the people
Yeah.
over in Europe, the people here in Massachusetts, and the 35 million descendants around the world from the half of the 100 plus passengers that survived. I mean, from that first winter, we lost half. And it's amazing to think we have approximately 35 million living people from 400 years ago from that small band. But what you've done is brought it even one step closer to reality for people. So I would love to know your story with it.
Well, I should point out too that the Virtual Mayflower project really wouldn't have happened without the contribution of the guys and gals at Plymouth Plantation. It was great because I'm actually Plymouth born and bred. I'm a Plymouthian myself, but when I got the invitation to go and see the Mayflower 2 before she went down to Mystic and was beautifully renovated, I managed to get on board and do some measurements and do some 360 photography and what have you. And they were just fantastic. And I cannot tell you, I met with the captain, Whit Perry, and the guys at Plymouth Plantation. And the things they showed me just really inspired me that what we were doing was right, in that we had to capture this famous ship and try and put her into some kind of educational context that particularly school kids would enjoy in the UK and in the US too. It's a real shame because it's been a 7 years actually, March 2014, it's been a 7-year labour of love. And we've had no funding whatsoever. No funding from any of the Mayflower organisations, no funding from Plymouth City Council. So my students, my research fellows and I, we've done it all out of our own pocket in our own time, but it's been well worth it. It really has been well worth it. So, but yeah, March 2014, we were invited because of some of the virtual reality work that we'd done, for example, looking at visualizing wrecks. We were invited down to a beach near Hastings. Hastings, of course, 1066, and more history there. A beach called Peck Level, where 1690, a ship of the line, a British ship of the line called the Anne, was scuttled and set alight, stopped the French from taking her captive. Now, this ship now rests underneath the sands and only gets exposed every so often when there are bad storms. Anyway, cut a long story short, we were able to work with the Hastings Museum people, and using what little data there were in terms of history behind this ship, we were able to put together this three-dimensional model of the Anne with a couple of actually quite talented French students who were with us at the time. And we modeled every plank, every compartment, every cannon, every carving. And this is kind of what happened. This is obviously seriously speeded up when you see this thing in action. And then we were able to put it into a virtual reality setting so that members of the public and school kids could go on board and walk around and explore the different decks.
Wow.
Now, what this demonstration did was kind of made us a little bit famous, particularly the southern half of the UK. And we were invited to a number of places, one of which said, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could do this for the Mayflower? And I thought, this is good. Mayflower, I live in Droitwich, which is where Edward Winslow was born. Of course, I mean, a key character in governing the Plymouth Plantation and liaising between the New World and England. I was born in Plymouth, so Mayflower became a no-brainer. I just had to do it. And as I say, we've been chiseling away at the Mayflower project since this time, and it really has been a roller coaster of emotions and a real labour of love. So it literally has been 7 years of unfunded labour of love.
Wow. Now, compared to the Anne, I know that we only have speculation on the size of the Mayflower, which obviously was, a lot of people think, of course, is a passenger ship. It's a merchant ship, if I believe correctly. Was she basically a merchant vessel, and that people were basically like cargo? Because normally you would only have the normal size crew that would man the Mayflower, I would imagine. So it must have been pretty cramped living conditions under there. As I've been to Mayflower 2 before, compared to the Anne, would she be probably half the size or 3/4 of the size?
Yes, exactly. Roughly half the size, maybe even smaller. But as you say, the living quarters, the deck below the main deck was incredibly small. There would have been, if you were lucky, you would have had a hammock. If not, you would have had something on the ground. You'd be sleeping between the very few cannons they had, the barrels. I mean, most of it was like barrels of water or barrels of beer, because obviously water was so badly infected and there were outbreaks of cholera in England, left, right, and centre. Then you've got things like the shallop that they put together. The shallop came in something 4 pieces, I think, according to what I was told in Plymouth Plantation. So that was stored down there. There were weapons, there was food. It's very hard to believe how they could actually manage to cross the Atlantic in such a way. Just the conditions, the smell, the seawater coming in, the fact that they had one of the main beams actually break during the crossing and had to be propped back up. I can't remember the story, but they had to shore up this broken beam to make sure that the ship didn't basically implode. So yes, it's very, very tiny.
The idea that the Mayflower, even would take that voyage and survive. I mean, especially because she left so late in the year anyways, and you're heading into the time when hurricanes are coming into the coast and whatnot. So, I mean, it's because she left late, if I remember
August.
reading correctly.
It was August in 60, yes.
Yeah.
She actually left although you won't believe it when you see the virtual reality demo, she left on a sunny day. So, but she left from, a very old, incredibly dirty and smelly harbour in Plymouth, as it would have been in the 17th century. It's one of the things that we're currently looking at recreating with our friends at OVR, which is a US company who's specialising in smell. We're hoping to do that for July, to be able to walk along the harbour in Plymouth and smell the delights of the 17th century, which is going to put a few people off, believe you me.
One of the stories that I heard is that the Mayflower, after she had been broken up and sold years later, that her beams or parts of them were incorporated into a barn in England. But I've also heard historians say that may not be the case, because obviously there were more than one Mayflower in the 17th century. Do you have any personal thoughts or insight into that?
Only from what I've read. We did get a contact from the guy who owns that barn in the southeast of the UK, or I think it's just to the north of London. And I was very keen to go down there with some of our university historians, but then something went very, very quiet. So the book itself, the book on the ending or the finding of the Mayflower, is open to a lot of controversy. There did seem to be quite a few ships called the Mayflower at the time. And then we had that famous painting, which is, again, I think it's called The End or the Death of the Mayflower, showing her listing to port in some muddy inlet somewhere around about Rotherhithe. So nobody knows. And yes, I mean, there are beams, there are doors, there are carvings in that barn, which are quite suggestive. And we would all love to think they were, but we've got no definitive proof, which is a real shame.
I would say even with dendrochronology, I mean, because the beams that with the Mayflower are obviously from probably wood from the 15th century, or from old forest cuts, and so it'd probably get equal age. So even dendrochronology probably would help. Well, what I would love to see, and as I'm sure as Terry would and our viewers, is to see what you've come up with for the Mayflower.
I mean, the Mayflower was in Plymouth. It was kind of here today and gone tomorrow. So the ship itself, people wax lyrical about the ship and its passengers and what happened to them, where they came from, and people talk about the trail towns. But what people forget is that from a historical perspective, the Barbican area or the Sutton Pool area, which is where the Pilgrims stayed before they left, the actual location of Mayflower Steps. I don't know if you've heard, but in the UK, we've got a Mayflower monument, which people call the Mayflower Steps. It's not. It's a monument to the City of the Mayflower. There is a myth, you'd call it, that the steps actually exist in the ladies' restrooms in the pub.
I've heard this.
Road.
Yes.
That's actually also a myth. We know where the steps exist because there's another few colleagues of ours that were renovating a building and actually found it. So the steps in the virtual reality model are, we would like to think, pretty damned accurate as to, so you go into this covered walkway, you go down through the covered walkway onto some very small number of steps. And it's almost as if it's a continuation of Castle Street from the castle at the time, Plymouth Castle, which is in ruins. You go down the steps onto a shallop, and then, as you'll see from the video, the shallop will then automatically take you out of the ship. You then go up the ladder on the side of the ship and you get on board, and you're in amongst a number of other passengers, including our best attempt at what Edward Winslow may have looked like in his military regalia prior to sailing. So the key to that was that we wanted to draw people's attention to what was going on at the time of the Mayflower. What were the incoming mariners trading in? What kind of trades were down there? What kind of animals were allowed to run free? For example, if you go to the Plymouth Barber today, there is a bakery there called Jacka Bakery. That was the bakery that provided the bread and the biscuits to the pilgrims back in 1620, and it still exists.
Wow.
So people don't realize this. And yeah, it wasn't a harbor like the paintings that we see. It always looks as if it's a modern style harbor with nice concrete wharves and places where you can tie your boat. No, it was mud. There were channels, literally channels of human excrement going down into Sutton Pool. It was a filthy place. There were human feces, there were animal feces, there were latrines, open latrines. I mean, it was a disgusting place. And it was throughout Europe. People don't realize that a lot of our history is horrible. So, for example, to be able to walk around as we're doing with our friends in OVR, the olfactory display, the smell company, to be able to walk around the Barbican, and we've even got one area which was notorious for ladies of the night, and ladies of the night, rather than smelling bad, used to have lavender oil or orange oil. So we're hoping to have the orange oil scent. But it's only when you get away from that stinky, filthy harbour and onto the Mayflower that you can breathe easy. So it's just using virtual reality to pull together education and experiences, certainly some experiences like that members of the public and school kids will never forget, that hopefully will give this demonstration that we've done after all these years a little bit of legacy that hopefully we can work with people to build on. I'd love to do this. I'd love to do a virtual reality version of Cape Cod and when the Mayflower actually arrived and Plymouth Plantation and that, but that's hopefully off the future.
No,
That
that's
would be
great.
amazing.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. Well, I mean, Plymouth Plantation right now is set to look like it did in 1627. So, I mean, you get a few years.
Well, yeah.
I really hope that everyone does click on the videos because we'll have the links on the show. And I mean, this is amazing. I mean, for me, my ancestors didn't arrive in New England until 1629. But obviously, the vessel that came over with the New England Company or with the Mass Bay Company was probably similar in size. They came over with Winthrop's fleet. They probably were not much different other than they came over as a fleet, as we believe, versus just one vessel as the Mayflower did. But to get an idea of you thinking your ancestors were leaving from some luxury port is definitely going to change their thoughts.
Yeah, I think this was not a luxury port. It was actually quite a small. Well, in fact, it was a pool. It was just an inlet that was guarded by a fishing toll house in the middle of the inlet. There was prior to that there was a chain that was put in place to defend Plymouth, the small town of Plymouth as it was from the French and the Spanish. And yes, there was very little there. There was very little there.
So to actually go to Plymouth today, there's elements and street names and some, obviously the bakery, but you're not going to see Plymouth 1620 when you go there. I think that people would have to be a little off their rocker if they would think that it hasn't changed in 400 years.
Right.
And obviously, is even the water line of the harbor been filled in further, or is it pretty much the same?
The harbor's changed quite considerably. It was built out. So in fact, it's been built out from the location of Mayflower Steps. It's been built out quite considerably. And then you've got the pier that goes out that contains the Mayflower commemoration archway, if you like. It's kind of similar but smaller version of the archway that they have in Plymouth, Massachusetts, where they've got the Plymouth Rock. But yes, it's been built out, and of course, when I was a kid down there, it was still quite industrial. But now it's obviously a marina and with flats and apartments and for the rich and wealthy.
Nice.
That's amazing. Well, Bob, thank you so very much. It was a real pleasure to have you and bring all of this history to us between the Anne and, of course, the more well-known Mayflower. I mean, it's just amazing. And do check out the videos and the websites, which we'll have available for everyone to click on at the end of this video. So on behalf of myself, and I'm sure Terry, thank you for bringing history from 400 years ago alive to us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
Well, that's all we have for VR Historians for you this episode, but stay tuned for more exciting history, virtual reality, and ways of bringing your past into your headset. Well, I'm virtually yours, and so is Terry. Until the next time, thanks so very much and have a great day.
For those of you watching on YouTube, remember you can also find us on the audio podcast of your choice. Currently, we can be found on Anchor, Breaker, Castbox, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. And for those of you listening on audio, remember you can always find the full video recording on our YouTube channel. And if you like this episode, please feel free to leave a comment on the website or on YouTube. As always, you can find us at virtualhistorians.com. You can email us at info@virtualhistorians.com. And we ask that you please like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you.